The rain came down hard that November night in Manhattan, the kind of rain that makes you question every decision that brought you to this moment. Phyllis Williams stood outside Carmine's on the Upper West Side, her black dress clinging to her curves, mascara threatening to run, and her heart pounding with that cocktail of excitement and dread that only a blind date can inspire. She was 20 minutes late. Her phone was dead. And somewhere inside that restaurant, a man she'd never met was supposedly waiting for her. A setup orchestrated by her well-meaning but meddling best friend who swore this guy was the one. Phyllis took a breath, pushed through the heavy wooden doors, and scanned the dimly lit space. That's when she saw him. Corner booth. Sharp jawline. Eyes like black diamonds that caught the candlelight. The suit he wore probably cost more than her rent, tailored to perfection, and when those eyes locked onto hers, something electric shot through her chest. He stood, a slight smile playing at his lips, and gestured to the empty seat across from him. This had to be him. Had to be. So she walked over, heels clicking against the hardwood, and slid into the booth, breathless and apologetic. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, tucking a wet strand of her dark auburn hair behind her ear. "My phone died and the subway was a nightmare and—" He raised one hand, silencing her with a gesture so smooth it felt choreographed. "You're here now," he said, his voice carrying the faintest accent, something that made every syllable sound deliberate, dangerous. "That's all that matters." His name, he told her, was Kim Lee. And for the next 2 hours, Phyllis forgot about her dead phone, her soaked dress, her crazy day. They talked about everything and nothing. He was magnetic, the kind of man who listened like your words were scripture, who asked questions that made you feel seen. He told her he worked in import-export, something vague about shipping logistics between Seoul and New York, and she didn't press because honestly she didn't care. The way he looked at her made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. When he ordered in Italian to the waiter without looking at the menu, when he poured her wine with hands that were somehow both gentle and commanding, she felt herself falling into something she couldn't name. Dangerous. Intoxicating. Real. Before we continue, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from because we love connecting with our global family. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what drops tomorrow. Now, back to Phyllis and the man who was about to turn her entire world upside down. The night ended with Kim Lee walking her to a black Mercedes parked on West 44th. Driver waiting, engine purring. "Let me take you home," he said, and it wasn't really a question. She should have said no. Should have called an Uber, played it safe. Followed the rules her mother drilled into her about strange men and first dates. But there was nothing safe about the way he made her feel. And maybe that's exactly what she wanted. In the back seat of that Mercedes, rain streaking the windows, Manhattan lights blurring past, he took her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and the gesture was so intimate, so possessive, that heat pooled in her stomach. "I want to see you again," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "Tomorrow." "I have work," she whispered, but her protest was weak. "Then after work." He pulled out his phone, a device that looked expensive and somehow encrypted, the kind of phone you see in spy movies. "Give me your number." She did. God help her, she did. What Phyllis didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Kim Lee wasn't her blind date. Her actual blind date, some accountant named Brad from Tinder, had cancelled last minute, sending a text to her dead phone that she'd never received. Kim Lee had been at Carmine's for entirely different reasons. Sit down. A meeting with a capo from the Gambino family to discuss territorial disputes in Flushing, Queens, where Kim's organization, the Jeondal, the Korean mob, had been expanding their gambling operations and causing friction. The meeting had gone well. Oh well. The Italians had agreed to let the Koreans operate freely in exchange for a cut, and some cooperation on a heroin pipeline running through Port Newark. Kim had been celebrating with a glass of Macallan when this beautiful black woman walked in, looking lost and vulnerable and absolutely stunning, and mistook him for someone else. He should have corrected her. Should have sent her away. But Kim Lee didn't get to where he was by passing up opportunities, and this woman, with her genuine smile and unguarded laugh, was an opportunity he couldn't resist. Not for business. For something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. Phyllis floated through the next 3 weeks like she was living in a dream. Kim Lee pursued her with an intensity that should have terrified her, but instead made her feel alive. Dinners at the most exclusive restaurants in the city. A weekend trip to the Hamptons where they stayed in a beach house that belonged to a friend. Gifts that appeared at her door. Not flowers or chocolates but thoughtful things. A first edition Toni Morrison novel because she mentioned loving, beloved. A vintage Hermes scarf in burnt orange because he said it matched her spirit. He never talked much about his work, but she noticed things. The way people looked at him when they entered a room. The deference. The fear masked as respect. The phone calls he'd take in Korean, stepping away with that same smooth urgency. His voice dropping to a tone that sent shivers down her spine. Once, at a bar in Koreatown, a man approached their table, bowing deeply and speaking in rapid Korean. Kim's face remained pleasant, but Phyllis saw his hand move beneath the table, saw the man's eyes widen, saw him back away quickly. "Old friend?" she asked when they were alone. "Business associate," Kim replied, sipping his soju. "Nothing to concern yourself with." But Phyllis was beginning to concern herself with a lot of things. The Mercedes that always seemed to be nearby. The driver, a stone-faced Korean man named Park, who carried himself like military, like violence wrapped in a suit. The apartment Kim kept in Tribeca, modern and immaculate and strangely impersonal, like a place designed for living but not for life. And then there was the night everything changed. They were at his apartment, tangled in his silk sheets, her body still humming from his touch. Kim had stepped into the shower, and Phyllis, wrapped in his dress shirt, wandered to the living room to pour herself water. That's when she saw it. His phone, face up on the marble counter, lit up with a message in Korean. She didn't speak the language, but she recognized the photo attachment. Man. Bound. Bloodied. And beneath it, a message in English from someone named Sungmin. "The rat has been handled. What do you want us to do with the body?" Phyllis's hands went numb. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile. Kim appeared in the doorway, water still dripping from his hair, towel wrapped around his waist, and the look on his face when he saw what she was staring at was something she'd never forget. Not anger. Not panic. Just a cold, calculated assessment. "Phyllis," he said quietly, moving toward her. She stumbled backward, glass crunching under her bare feet, pain sharp but distant. "What is that? Who are you?" He stopped, giving her space, hands raised like he was approaching a frightened animal. "I think you should sit down. Tell me the truth." Her voice cracked. "Right now, Kim. Tell me the goddamn truth." He studied her for a long moment, and she watched something shift in his expression. A decision being made. "My family runs an organization," he said finally, each word careful. "We've operated in New York for 20 years. Gambling, protection, some import-export that isn't exactly legal. I'm what the Italians would call a boss. What we call a kangpai. And that message you saw was about a man who betrayed us. Who got people killed. Who had to be dealt with." The room tilted. Phyllis gripped the counter to steady herself. "You're a gangster. I prefer businessman. You kill people. I protect my family," he said, and there was steel in his voice now. "I do what's necessary in a world you don't understand. But I've never lied to you about who I am, Phyllis. You just never asked the right questions. You should have run. Should have grabbed her clothes and run out that door and never looked back." Every instinct screamed at her to flee. But then Kim moved closer, carefully, and his hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek, and his eyes held something she didn't expect. Vulnerability. Fear even. Fear of losing her. "I didn't plan this," he said softly. "That night at the restaurant I thought you were someone else. A complication I didn't need. But then you smiled at me and I couldn't let you walk away. I know what I am. I know what I do. But what I feel for you, Phyllis, that's real. That's the most real thing in my life." And God help her, she believed him. Maybe she was stupid. Maybe she was in shock. Or maybe somewhere deep down she'd always known. Known that men like Kim Lee don't exist in the normal world. That the way he moved through life, the power he wielded, came from somewhere dark. "I need time," she whispered. He nodded, stepping back. "Take all the time you need. But understand something. You know who I am now. That makes you either part of my world or a risk to it. And I won't let anyone hurt you because of what you know. Which means whether you like it or not, you're under my protection." Phyllis went home that night in a daze. Park driving her in silence to her small apartment in Harlem. She spent the next 3 days calling in sick to her job at the publishing house, lying in bed, trying to process the impossible situation she'd stumbled into. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from Kim. Not pushy, not demanding, just checking in, making sure she was okay, telling her he was there when she was ready to talk. On the 4th day, her best friend Maya showed up at her door with Thai food and wine. "Okay, you've been ghosting me for weeks and now you look like death," Maya said, pushing past her. "What's going on? Is it the blind date guy? Did Brad turn out to be a psycho?" Phyllis almost laughed. Brad. The accountant she'd never met. "It's complicated," she said. "Complicated how?" And because she needed to tell someone, because the secret was eating her alive, Phyllis told Maya everything. About the mix-up at the restaurant. About Kim Lee. About what she'd discovered. Maya listened, eyes growing wider with each revelation, until Phyllis finished and they both sat in stunned silence. "So you're dating a Korean mob boss," Maya said finally. "Jesus Christ, Phyllis. This is insane. You need to go to the police. And tell them what? That the man I've been sleeping with might be involved in organized crime. They'll laugh me out of the precinct. Or worse, if Kim really is who he says, going to the cops might get me killed. Then you need to disappear. I'll help you. We can go to my cousin's place in Atlanta, figure this out." But even as Maya said it, Phyllis knew she wasn't going to run. Because despite everything, despite the danger and the darkness and the absolute insanity of it all, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Kim looked at her. Like she was precious. Like she mattered. Like she was worth protecting in a world where he protected very few things. "I think I'm in love with him," she whispered. Maya's face crumpled. "Oh, honey. No. But love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about logic or safety or good sense." And when Phyllis finally texted Kim that she wanted to see him, he was at her door within the hour. They sat on her worn couch, the same couch where she'd had normal dates with normal guys, and he told her everything. About growing up in Busan, South Korea, son of a mid-level enforcer in the Jeondal. About coming to New York at 19 to expand the organization's footprint. About the violence he'd committed, the men he'd killed, the empire he'd built through blood and cunning. He didn't sugarcoat it. Didn't try to make himself the hero. "If you stay with me," he said, holding her hand, "your life will never be normal. You'll always be looking over your shoulder. My enemies will see you as a weakness, a way to get to me. And there will be things I do, things I have to do that will make you hate me. But I will never lie to you again. And I will die before I let anyone hurt you." Phyllis looked into those dark eyes and made a choice that would define the rest of her life. "Then I stay." The next 6 months were a crash course in a world Phyllis never knew existed. Kim kept his promise. He never lied. He told her about the operations, the players, the rules of a game played in shadows. She met his inner circle. Sungmin, his underboss, a man with a smile like a knife. Park, who she learned was more bodyguard than driver, an ex-Korean Special Forces operative loyal unto death. Jin-soo, the consigliere, the strategist who planned every move 3 steps ahead. They were wary of her at first, this outsider, this American woman who'd stumbled into their boss's life. But Kim made it clear. Phyllis was protected. Phyllis was respected. Touch her and you answer to him. She learned the language of his world. Wet work meant killing. The sit-down meant a meeting between families. Going to the mattresses meant war. She learned that Kim's organization controlled gambling dens from Flushing to Fort Lee, ran protection rackets for Korean businesses throughout the tri-state area, and partnered with Mexican cartels to move product through Port Newark. She learned that the violence she'd seen in that photo wasn't random cruelty. It was business, cold, calculated, necessary. And she learned that loving a man like Kim Lee meant accepting that part of him lived in darkness. There were nights he came home with blood on his knuckles, his eyes distant, and she'd draw him a bath and sit with him in silence, not asking questions he couldn't answer. There were mornings she'd wake to find him already gone, handling some crisis, some threat, and she'd spend the day trying not to imagine the worst. But there were also moments of shocking tenderness. The way he'd cook for her, traditional Korean dishes his mother taught him, moving through the kitchen with the same precision he brought to everything. The way he'd read to her, English novels with his accented pronunciation, his head in her lap. The way he'd hold her after making love, fingers tracing patterns on her skin, whispering things in Korean she didn't understand but felt in her soul. "Sarangi," he'd murmur. "Love you." The trouble started in July. A new player entered the New York scene. Tommy the Turk Esposito, a capo in the Lucchese family, decided the Koreans had gotten too big for their britches. He wanted them out of Queens. Wanted their gambling operations, their connections, their respect. He started small, shaking down business owners who paid Kim for protection, roughing up low-level guys in Kim's crew, sending a message. Kim tried to handle it diplomatically. A sit-down at a social club in Little Italy. Calm words, reasonable offers. But Tommy was young, ambitious, and stupid. He saw Kim's willingness to negotiate as weakness. "You think you can come to this city," Tommy said, pointing a finger across the table, "and act like you run things? This is our town. Always has been. You slant-eyed fucks need to remember your place." Sungmin moved, reaching for the gun under his jacket, but Kim stopped him with a look. "We're leaving," Kim said quietly, standing. "But understand something, Tommy. You just made a choice. And choices have consequences." Phyllis was at Kim's Tribeca apartment when he returned from the meeting, his face a mask of controlled rage. "What happened?" she asked. "War," he said simply. "Pack a bag. You're going somewhere safe. I'm not leaving you." He turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "This isn't negotiable. Tommy Esposito just signed his death warrant, but before I can handle him, he's going to come at me with everything. That means car bombs, drive-bys, hits on people I care about. I will not risk you." They fought. God, how they fought. Phyllis screaming that she wasn't some fragile thing to be hidden away. Kim icily insisting that her safety was more important than her pride. It ended with her in tears and him on his knees in front of her, forehead pressed to her stomach, his voice breaking. "I've killed 23 men in my life," he whispered. "I've done things that would make you sick. I've built an empire on fear and blood. But if something happened to you, if I lost you because I was too stubborn to protect you properly, I wouldn't survive it. Please, Phyllis. Please." So she let Park drive her to a safe house in the Poconos, a cabin owned by one of Kim's shell companies, isolated and secure. She spent 2 weeks there, watching the news, checking her phone obsessively for updates. The war played out in headlines. Gangland violence erupts in Queens. Multiple bodies found in Flushing. Federal task force investigates organized crime connections. Kim called her every night. His voice tired but steady. He told her they were winning. That Tommy had underestimated them. Thought the Koreans would be easy targets. But Kim's crew was disciplined, organized, vicious. They hit Tommy's gambling operations. Burned his restaurants. Killed 3 of his top guys in coordinated strikes that sent a message. You can't touch the Giondel. Then, on the 15th night, Kim's call came at 3 in the morning. "It's done," he said. "Tommy. In a landfill in Staten Island." The Lucchese family reached out. They want peace. They're cutting ties with Tommy's crew, offering reparations. "We won." Phyllis should have felt relieved. But all she heard was the exhaustion in his voice. The cost of victory. "Come get me," she said. "I want to come home." When Park brought her back to the city, Kim was waiting at the Tribeca apartment, and the moment she saw him, she understood. This was who he was. A man who waged war to protect what was his. A man who made impossible choices in an impossible world. A man who loved her enough to stain his hands darker so hers could stay clean. They made love that night with desperate intensity, two people clinging to each other against the darkness, and afterward, lying in the tangle of sheets, Kim asked her a question. "Marry me." Phyllis went still. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, propping himself up on one elbow to look at her. "I know it's insane. I know what I'm asking you to tie yourself to. But I want you as my wife. I want the world to know you're mine. I want to build something with you that isn't just survival. Something real." She thought about her life before him. The predictable days. The safe choices. The careful path she'd been walking toward a future that looked exactly like everyone else's. And she thought about this moment, lying next to a man who terrified and thrilled her, who showed her that life could be dangerous and passionate and utterly consuming. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married 3 months later in a private ceremony at his estate in Westchester. The guest list a bizarre mix of Kim's Korean crew and Phyllis's bewildered family. Her mother pulled her aside before the ceremony, gripping her hands. "Baby, are you sure about this? This man, this life, it's not what I wanted for you." "I know, Mama," Phyllis said, kissing her cheek. "But it's what I want for me." The reception was lavish, beautiful, and surreal. Toasts given in Korean and English. Mafia bosses from 3 families in attendance. A show of respect for the peace Kim had brokered. Maya, her maid of honor, whispered in her ear during the first dance. "I still think you're crazy. But damn girl, you look happy." And she was. Deliriously, impossibly happy. Kim spun her across the dance floor, his hand at her waist, and whispered promises in Korean that she was starting to understand. "Sarangi, Jungwinhee, love you, forever." But forever in their world was a fragile thing. 5 months into their marriage, on a freezing February night, Phyllis's life shattered. She was coming home from dinner with Maya, laughing about something stupid, wrapped in the cashmere coat Kim had bought her when she saw the cars. Black SUVs, flashing lights, federal agents swarming the Tribeca building. Her heart stopped. She pushed through the crowd, screaming Kim's name, and an agent caught her arm. "Ma'am, you need to stay back. That's my husband. What's happening? Where is he?" The agent's face was granite. "Kim Lee is being arrested on charges of racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and organized crime activity. If you're his wife, you might want to get yourself a lawyer." They wouldn't let her see him. Wouldn't let her anywhere near him. She watched through tear-blurred eyes as they brought Kim out in handcuffs, flanked by agents, his face expressionless. But when his eyes found hers in the crowd, something cracked in that mask. Anguish, raw and real. "I love you," he mouthed. And then he was gone. The trial was a media circus. Federal prosecutors painted Kim as a monster, the head of a violent criminal enterprise that had terrorized the city for years. They had wiretaps, financial records, testimony from men Kim had trusted, men who'd flipped to save themselves. Junzu, Consigliere, the strategist, the rat. Phyllis sat in that courtroom every single day, dressed in her best clothes, chin high, refusing to let them see her break. She locked eyes with Kim whenever she could, sending him silent messages. "I'm here. I'm not leaving. We'll survive this." But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Kim Lee was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. No parole. No deals. The gavel came down, and Phyllis's world ended. She visited him every week at the Federal Correctional Facility in Otisville, New York. Sat across from him in that cold visiting room, their hands separated by plexiglass, and tried to be strong. "I'm going to appeal," she said the first visit. "I'm going to find the best lawyers. I'm going to get you out." Kim smiled, sad and tired. Don't waste your life waiting for me, Phyllis. You're young. You're beautiful. You deserve better than this. Don't you dare, she said fiercely. Don't you dare tell me what I deserve. Chose you. Chose this. And I'm not going anywhere. 30 years, he said quietly. I'll be an old man when I get out. If I survive that long, then we'll be old together. The years crawled past. Phyllis rebuilt her life around the visits, the phone calls, the letters. She took over managing Kim's legitimate business interests, the ones the feds couldn't touch, keeping the money flowing to support his crew on the outside. She learned strength she never knew she had. Learned how to navigate a world that saw her as the wife of a convicted criminal. How to hold her head high when people whispered. How to love a man through prison glass. 5 years in, Sung-min came to her apartment. He'd taken over operations after Kim's arrest, and he looked older, harder. I have a message from Kim, he said. He wants you to move on. Find someone else. Be happy. Phyllis stared at him. Is that what he really wants? Or is that what you think is best? Sung-min's jaw tightened. The feds are still watching. Being connected to Kim makes you a target. He's trying to protect you. I've been protecting myself just fine for 5 years, she said coldly. You tell Kim that if he wants to end this, he can tell me himself. To my face. But I already know what he'll say. 'Cause we made promises. And I keep mine. 10 years in, they caught Jin-soo, the rat who'd testified against Kim. Someone in the organization, maybe Sung-min, maybe someone else, finally tracked him down in witness protection. They found him in a motel room in Tucson, shot twice in the head. Phyllis heard about it on the news and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just cold acknowledgement that in Kim's world, betrayal had a price. 15 years in, Phyllis turned 45. She sat in that visiting room, looking at Kim across the plexiglass, both of them graying, both of them marked by time, and he took the phone with hands that trembled slightly. I'm sorry, he said. For all of this. For what I took from you. You didn't take anything, she replied. I gave it freely. Every day. Every year. That was my choice. Why? He asked, and she heard the break in his voice. Why do you stay? Phyllis smiled, tears streaming down her face. Because that night at Carmine's when I walked in and saw you, I felt something I'd never felt before. Like I'd found the other half of my soul. And you don't abandon your soul, Kim. Not for anything. Not even for freedom. 23 years in, Kim collapsed in the prison yard. Heart attack. They rushed him to the hospital, and for 3 days, Phyllis sat by his bedside, holding his hand, praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. He survived. Barely. The doctors said his heart was weak. That the stress, the time, the life he'd lived, it had all taken its toll. And Phyllis realized, with horrible clarity, that Kim might not survive his full sentence. That they might never get there forever. She hired a new lawyer. The best appeals attorney on the East Coast. They argued for compassionate release. Medical grounds. Kim's model behavior. His deteriorating health. The parole board reviewed the case. And on a gray November morning, 30 years after that first night at Carmine's, 25 years after Kim's arrest, they got the call. Compassionate release granted. Kim Lee was coming home. Phyllis was waiting outside Otisville when they brought him out. An old man now, 68 years old, moving slowly but alive. His eyes found hers in the parking lot, and the smile that crossed his face was the same smile from that first night. Magnetic. Devastating. Real. She ran to him and he caught her, and they held each other in the cold November air, both of them crying, both of them laughing, both of them whole for the first time in 25 years. I told you, she whispered against his chest. I told you we'd be old together. My stubborn, beautiful wife, he murmured, kissing her hair. You waited. I'd wait 1,000 years. They drove back to New York together, Park at the wheel, older but still loyal, still there. The city had changed. The world had changed. But some things, the important things, remained. That night, in a new apartment in a quieter part of the city, far from the violence and the empire that once was, Phyllis and Kim lay together in the darkness. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Any of it?" She thought about the question. About the life she could have had. The safe choices. The normal path. And she thought about what she did have. A love story that defied logic. A man who showed her the depths of loyalty and sacrifice. 25 years of visiting rooms and collect calls and letters that sustained her through the darkest nights. "Not for a second," she said, lacing her fingers through his. "This life with you, even with all the pain and the waiting and the cost, it was real. It was mine. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." The lesson of Phyllis and Kim isn't about right or wrong, legal or illegal, safe or dangerous. It's about the choices we make when we love someone. About standing by those choices even when the world tells us we're insane. About finding your person in the most unexpected moment and deciding that whatever comes after, you'll face it together. Love doesn't always look like fairy tales. Sometimes it looks like prison visits and collect calls. Sometimes it looks like waiting 25 years for a future that might never come. But when it's real, when it's the kind of love that sees you through the darkness, it's worth every sacrifice. Phyllis Williams walked into a restaurant on a rainy November night thinking she was meeting a blind date. Instead, she found her soulmate in the most dangerous man in New York. And she never looked back. So what did you think about Phyllis and Kim's story? Could you love someone through 25 years of prison visits? Could you build a life around that kind of loyalty? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from, because we absolutely love hearing from our global family. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit that button now. Tomorrow we've got another story dropping that you absolutely cannot miss. Trust me, you'll want to be here for it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.